Elvina Farkas. I've just learnt the proper pronunciation of your name. Hungarian. I didn't know that. Welcome to the first word. It's such a treat to have you on the screen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm actually very excited to be here.
Well, it's funny because I was like scrolling through Instagram as I do, and a picture of you and your son popped up, and it was such a beautiful photo. And then I recognized your name because many moons ago, I used to work as a booker at a modeling agency, and I'm sure I would have seen your name in Rush
Yes.
And all of the things. And I was like, oh my God, I wonder what you've been up to. Scrolling through, and you're a mum now, you're a business owner, you've got these incredible projects happening all over the world. So I had to reach out and steal you for the potty. And I'm so grateful that you were like, yes.
I mean, any chance for me to talk about anything and everything. Like, I'm a mum now, so social life is diminished a little bit, I'll be honest.
Yes.
So anytime anyone wants to talk to me, like, please do.
Oh my God, I know. This is our social outing. We'll still get time. And I'm like, what'd you have for lunch? What'd you do? Who'd you chat to? And he's like, babe, like, can I just have 2 minutes just to and I'm like, no.
I'm that woman now that goes out shopping, and any auntie that just wants to strike up a conversation at the register, I'm like, yes, how are you? How's your life? Oh, my kids are great. Thank you for asking. Like that's my social moments. Like that's it. That's my life.
We are social beings. I guess we're meant to just continuously find that community and
For
chat.
sure.
Yeah,
Definitely.
you're like me, the chatter. I love it.
Gemini.
But you are a jack of all trades. So you are a photographer, you're a director. I'm assuming you've also got writing components. You're a traveler, you're a mum, you're so much. So tell us about the beginnings of your career and what drove you into the creative realm. And then obviously it's now flourished and expanded into motherhood. So if you can summarize all that for us in a nutshell.
Ooh, to summarize it. Okay. I mean, I have a joke with my family that I've been working for as long as I can actually remember, because my parents were business owners, and we owned a roadhouse in the middle of Australia. It was called Wycliffe Well, and it was a little truck stop 400 kilometers north of Alice Springs.
Wow.
And not only was it a truck stop, but it was a holiday, Big Four holiday park. And it was a tourist destination because we were famous for UFO sightings in Australia. In fact, we were considered the number one UFO hotspot in Australia, number 2 in the world, just after Roswell, according to Times magazine.
Oh, wow. Do you believe in UFOs?
I do. That's like a whole other podcast, I'll tell you that. But, I think I've seen and I've spoken to enough people who many people would probably just deem them crazy. But I've chatted to a lot of people over my life, and I just think the universe is just too big for us to be the only ones. But yeah, like that's how it started. So like my entire life was working behind the counter, turning over rooms to get ready for the next day. I was working in the restaurant, serving, chips and salads and, doing the dishes. So for honestly, as long as I can remember, I have been working. And I think that was really the start of my career, because that hard work as a child instilled in you is just what you bring to every aspect of your life afterwards. It's funny because after all the cool things that I've done in the creative field, the one thing that I'm actually still really most proud of is my first job that I got when I was 14. I was a casual sales assistant. Do you remember, I don't know if you remember this, there was a shop called Chain Reaction.
Yes.
And it was a lot like JJ's and Supre. And it sold like trendy clothes. Anyways, that got bought out by Katie's later on. And at that stage, I'd been working there since I was 14, and it turned into Katie's, which at that time was a little bit more like catering to the mature woman. It was well-dressed. And, I was a 16-year-old at that time. And the headquarters basically came in and said, look, we could either let you go, or, you can stay on and work here. And I just thought, why not? I'll just keep going. Like I'll sell clothes, like whatever. I was trying to save for a car at that stage. So I was like, I'll do whatever. Turns out I ended up taking a 2IC role, which is second in charge role, after my boss. And I was 16 years old at the time. And they offered it to me because they were just like, you know what, you are everything that we need. And I mean, albeit I was in Alice Springs, I don't think there were a lot of other options. But yeah, that moment, I got this letter from HQ and they were like, congratulations on being the youngest 2IC in our company. And that to today is my most
Were you still at school?
proud moment. Sorry?
Were you still at school?
I was still at school. So again, that drive to just want to have my own money and buy my own things and be independent. My mum really instilled that in me. She always said, one of her regrets, because she relied so much on my father, and they're still married till today, but this is something that she has said to me every step of the way is, if I had my own money and I probably would have left your father years ago. She's just says it jokingly, I think.
Yeah, I feel like so many women say similar things. I totally get it.
Yeah, but it was one of those things that she would always say is, just never rely on a man. You are in this position where you can be whoever you want to be and do whatever you want to do. And, that's really important. And that's basically what has just driven me every step of the way. And yeah, like that was, so I got my car, I bought my first car at that stage. And yeah, it was then, graduated. Didn't know what I wanted to do, to be honest. I thought I wanted to go into interior design and I applied at RMIT. I got a position. And that's how I moved to Melbourne. I kind of just packed up and went, okay, I guess I'm going to Melbourne and I'll defer for a year and get a feel for Melbourne. And this is probably where our paths crossed at this stage, because a little bit before that, I was shooting family portraits. Again, another side gig, just trying to get money into my pocket. And, I used to shoot family portraits all the time. And, that was just easy cash. I never really thought you can make a career out of photography. And then I kind of came to Melbourne and I was just in awe of, all these cool people and the fashion. And I just loved magazines and, opening those glossy pages and looking at all these fashion spreads and going, well, why can't I do that? And it just so happened that I started shooting model tests because one of my friends at that time said, you can get a little bit of money shooting model tests, right? Like you've got a folio, albeit like a really shitty family portrait folio, but look, I've got some friends you can shoot and you can use that and see if you can contact some agencies. And that's what I did. And I started shooting model tests.
Yes.
Yep. And I used to contact every single agency, Vivian's included. And that's how I essentially started down the fashion route. But yeah, it was assisting under commercial photographers as well, trying to get some money in my pocket. But where I really broke through was I was living in Little Collins Street at the time.
Ooh.
There's Little Collins Street in Queens has this beautiful purple building called Excelsior.
And this is like the Mecca of Melbourne. You were like really in the heart of Melbourne.
I stayed in the city. I know, but I stayed in the city just because I was naive, because I was from Alice Springs and I didn't know any other area of Melbourne. Like, I was like, the city will do. Like, that just seems safe. It was a terrible idea, like, to be honest, because Sunday morning when you run out of milk and you need to go downstairs and get milk and you'd be in your PJs and Monday morning you'd be in your PJs trying to get, some milk and everybody's in suits and rushing off to work and you're like, oh God. Probably should have dressed up a little bit for this.
Thank God I was 7-Eleven at that point.
Know. That was convenience stores were convenient.
Yeah.
There's a reason they're convenient. But yeah, so my idea, I started, making friends with models, and we had this idea, why don't we have this networking party on the rooftop of my apartment? And we just went, all right, let's do this. Facebook at the time was glorious, the Facebook party invites. We sent one out to everyone we knew. I hired a DJ. I'm pretty sure I paid him in alcohol, if I recall correctly. I think it was literally yeah, exactly, Contra. I mean, I've been paid in so much clothes by that stage. I could pay him in alcohol.
Totally.
Yeah, we threw a networking party and it just way too many people showed up and we got shut down by the police at 1 for, being too loud. But that was where everybody got my name. And
Wow,
after that, I
you were the
started
party
shooting.
girl.
Yeah, this is pre-social media, right? So this
Yeah.
was the best way to meet people. And yeah, everybody came, all the models. I had all the best models there, all of the names that are, off in New York doing amazing things. But that was it. That's what I did, and it paid off. I mean, I think I invested about $500 to a couple of like plastic chairs and some
That
more
is so
alcohol, a
cool.
bit of food and some chips. But yeah, I met all the editors. I started shooting for Fashion Journal.
How
And then
did
that
you
just
get
kind of
editors to come to your rooftop party?
well, the models. It was
Oh,
really
yes,
the
the
models.
models.
And then, but you know what's funny now? Because back in the day, it used to be really cool to be friends with the models and the really pretty people.
Mm,
But now, because of social media and everybody's somebody, you really need to be friends with the producers.
yeah.
That's who you need to know, because the producers are who is going to get you jobs and, in your foot in the door. It's not the pretty people anymore, because everybody's pretty now.
Yes,
Like,
totally.
everybody's pretty now. Like, it's actually unbelievable. And everybody's got, their following and the
Mm,
arena that they sit in. But, if, to get your foot in the door now, I think you really need to know the editors, you need to know the producers, you need to know the execs. It's just, they're the important people. And it's just changed so much from when we were around,
yeah.
how you would get your foot in the door to now. It's a different ballgame.
It is.
Totally.
And I feel like that concept of networking is as important as ever, because everyone is someone to
Yeah.
make to make yourself stand out or to be taken seriously from a business perspective.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
you've got to find ways to network that are unique. So gone are the days where you could have a party. Now it's like, how do I get that person to open my email, to pick up my call, to read
Yeah.
my LinkedIn notification? Like,
Yeah.
and it's a lot harder. However, I guess the gratification when you do sort of step forward, like you have and had so much success, is so much more, because it is really hard. It's so competitive because everyone is. I think technology allows everyone's talents to become not exaggerated. Like, everyone's talented, but it allows everyone to become sort of more, visible.
Yeah. Exactly. Yep. And that's like one of my biggest struggles even till today. Like, that's one of my biggest fears in business is the whole self-marketing. Like,
Oh
it
yeah,
was
it's a bitch.
it's hard, and like
Yeah.
even till this day it's something I'm so insecure about. I had like this really like pivotal moment in my career, I'll say, when it was just after I did a lot of my TV guest appearances. I was on Asia's Next Top Model as a guest
That is so
host,
cool
and
to me. I
no,
have watched all of the Australia's Next Top Models, hence why I worked in modeling agency. I just adore it. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, must meet Elvina.
that was a big honor and was very scary to actually be on
Oh,
the other side.
totally.
So, as you would say. But yeah, so I did a few guest appearances, and I followed up with like History's channel Photo Face Off. I did 2 seasons of that. And then I did a bit of this like media circus showcase of going around on the radios and promoting the program and that sort of stuff. And
So this is overseas. Is
this
this
was in
Singapore?
Singapore. Yeah,
Yeah, gotcha.
correct. So I had moved to Singapore in 2013. And as something that you'll understand, it was simply just following my market.
Model. Yeah.
And I
And
say my market.
for those who are not aware, for Australian models, Singapore is a massive market because it's so
It is.
commercial, and they love I don't know what it is. They love the girls and the guys, to be honest. They all tended to go very early in their career and
Yep.
stay, I don't know, like 6 to 12 months, build up their portfolio, earn some money, come
Yep.
back, and hopefully
Yep.
make a name for themselves. But yeah, Singapore was a big market, so I
Yeah.
can definitely
And that
understand why you're there.
being half Singaporean was my connection already in that sense. But as I said, I had made my name in Melbourne that way, and I went over to Singapore for my cousin's wedding. So funny enough. And I thought, you know what, let me meet with some magazines here and see if I can, get some work there. And that's when I met with Kenneth Go, who at that time was the stylist of Harper's Bazaar, who's now the editor-in-chief. And, we had spoken to him, and I was with Luke at that stage. And we just said, you know what we've realized is that none of the magazines here in Singapore are doing behind the scenes or digital content, at that stage that were like, rehashing old articles and posting it online. And that was really as far as they got with digital content. And we just said to them, look, I know you might not see value in this, but we'll come in at a really baseline price and just do some behind the scenes content for you. And yeah, that's how, anyways, that's how we started there. And we went,
so
you know what,
your
let's move to
husband.
Singapore. Yeah.
Luke's your husband, and is he a videographer or just digital
he's
content?
a DOP and a director. He was doing short films at that stage, a lot of film work and TV work, actually. And I kind of sucked him into this like beauty fashion world, which he couldn't give two rat's ass about, to be honest. But, he's got a really great eye, and he's just such a perfectionist with everything that he does. And, in fashion and beauty, that is really a very prized skill to have. And, his lighting is above and beyond with everything that we do. He is just such a perfectionist, and it was the balance to me, because I'm a little bit more about the mood, the aesthetic. Like, I'm more about like, what can I get this girl to do, in front of the camera? And Luke's like, okay, you worry about that and I'll make it look glorious.
So that's so nice. Like, that's such a good harmony between the two of you. You're sort of the artist, and then I guess he finds a way to make sure it has that commercial angle.
Yeah, he's
and
very
really
meticulous that way. Totally meticulous. And it's just, even to this, he's taught me so much. I mean, I was a self-taught photographer anyways to begin with. So everything that I know in terms of the technical aspects is just from watching him. And it's a good balance, because, I also just tell him to ease back a lot as well, because he can get very focused on things that probably don't matter to anybody else. But it's important to him, and it's like, let it go, mate. Just let it go.
How did you two meet? Was it at the infamous Melbourne rooftop party?
No, so he wasn't there for that, actually. But I was invited later on to a magazine's Halloween party.
Oh,
and he was there with one of my good friends. She was a model at that stage, and he had gone with her to this Halloween party, and I had gone with a friend of mine, one of my best friends from like my high school, who had come to visit me in Melbourne, and we were just going to go just to have, free drinks and get dressed up and have a bit of fun. Anyways, we started chatting and discovered that he was the studio manager at one of the studios that I shoot at in Richmond quite often. Which I'd heard about, but I had obviously never booked it at that stage. And he was like doing his little business spiel, like, hey, yeah, you can come shoot at my studio, and, we'll give you a good rate, and, I'll help you out. I can assist you. And here I thought, oh, great. I need free assistance. Like, that sounds ace to me. Meanwhile, it's just because he thought I was cute.
Love that. So nice.
But yeah, and then I started shooting at his studio quite often, and he would assist me, and yeah, we'd have lunches and coffees, and it kind of just graduated from there. And yeah, like fast forward 14 years later, and we're still having lunches and coffees.
So on working with your husband, I'm so curious, because if I think of, if Will and I worked together, what would that look like? And I don't know the answer, but when how do you separate and like park work and then find yourself in the relationship? Even park parenthood, just go out on a date, or, if you've got a really hard day at work, or if you're disagreeing on like the angle of something, how do you, because I'm sure sometimes like you go home from work and you've got a frustration with a colleague because you couldn't join forces. So when that happens with you guys, you go home to each other. How does that look?
It's a lot of communication.
Yeah.
Like, funny enough, it comes so much into your role as a mum as well, because
Yeah.
I've realized that what I do with Luke is what I do with my own kids too now.
Oh, I'm the same. Totally, totally. And you do learn the art of communication when you're dealing with little people
It's
who have, yeah.
yeah, you know what I reckon all people should do is take a management course, because
Yeah.
it's really about your language and how you put forward your needs. It's just that simple. It's the whole I feel when this happens,
Yeah.
and I need this and it needs to be done by this. Like
Yeah.
it's language, really. At the end of the day, it's just how you um come across with your feelings and making sure that they're heard and that you're not imposing what you think as what they're experiencing. So
Yeah,
it's
totally.
it's really a language thing, and that came actually from being a business owner, learning how to speak to my staff and learning how to get the best out of my workers. And even just as a director,
Mm.
um, knowing how to talk to people where they'll feel comfortable and safe, and they can express what they need to express with you as well. And that's really how I've gone about everything in terms of even my motherhood. I do that to my kids as well. It's like, okay, let's take
Yeah.
a break a second. When you're doing that, I feel like this.
Yeah,
And
totally.
it's not as effective with a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old. There's still levels of it that probably will eventually work down the track.
Yes.
Because kids are selfish and parents are selfish, and we just want it our way, and it's just a power conflict more than anything with kids. But yeah, that's what I've had to learn, and that is a lesson that's obviously I didn't have, like, when we first were in the relationship, but
Mm.
it's a lesson that I have now, being a business owner, and later on I was in a management position in Singapore, in a corporate environment, which I never
Wow.
thought I would do ever in my life. Um, it Yeah, that was in a management position, and literally in the first year of being in this corporate environment, this was COVID. I was told to let go of my entire team of 14 people, and
Oh
I'd
my gosh.
like been there at that stage for maybe 8 months. And it was the worst day of my life. Like,
Yeah.
it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And
Yeah.
even though it wasn't my decision, it wasn't like I was the one firing them. I was the one having to deliver that news.
Mm.
And, that still, that sticks with you regardless, because you have, these people, their lives, what this is
Mm.
affecting, what it's going to impact. And it's a very hard thing to do. But it's your job and you have to do it. But
Mm.
yeah, like there's a lot of things and lessons in my life that I've learned where it really is just communication, and
Mm.
that is just the key to life, really. Just being
Um,
able to talk to people.
I had Lael Stone on the potty earlier on, and we were talking,
Yeah.
and she said something that always resonates with me in terms of communication, but the um, the need to listen. So sometimes I find, let's say if Will comes home, or one of the boys, or Hamish comes home, and they're in a mood, or they've had a day and they just want to vent,
Yeah.
instead of going to that classic like fixing, why don't you try
Yeah.
this, why
Let
don't you
me
try
solve
this,
your
just
problem. Yeah.
listen. And that is such an equal part of communication sometimes, is not necessarily what you say, but just allowing them to like just load it all, like get it all out,
Yep.
and then
Spot
to
on.
like allow that, like hold space for whatever it is they're going through. And
Yep.
even that, to communicate, even though it's one-sided, it's actually not, just having that ability to just hear them, nod
Yep.
along and say, that sounds like it's really rough. Or,
Yep.
even when Hayne, he's like, someone didn't want to be my friend today. Like, instead of now just being like, oh, well, have you tried this? Have you tried this? It's like, oh, that sucks. That I would have been
Yep.
really sad if that happened to me. It's
Yep.
crazy what you learn. But
Exactly.
I think talking to Lael Stone, I learned how to do it with my kids. And now I've learned how to put that into my relationship, and it has the same effect. Not
Are we
saying my
secretly saying
husband's
that our husbands are like our kids?
I know, but not saying that my husband is a 4-year-old. However, just those basic fundamental things that you forget as an adult, and they're so effective. And then you think, I wonder why I just do this with kids. I could do this with anyone, and it has that
Yeah.
really nurturing, compassionate feel. And it's nice, I think. And now I really
Yeah.
appreciate it when that's reversed, and I just want to like vent and have a big old bitch about something. And I love it when Will just listens, it's just nice to be able to get it out.
And I reckon that is one of our strengths as women, being leaders in our roles, because we are nurturing by nature.
Yeah.
Like we want to take care of people. And, as a boss, I think that's something that is such a important part of your role, and it's such a multifaceted role. Like, you have to do all these boring things like administration and all the rest of it. But being with people and knowing how to take care of people is the most important part, because without the people, you don't have a business, you don't have a job. So, that is such an important part of being who we are. And it's hard. Like, it's hard having to take care of people and be mindful of what they need, but also what you need. And then also, boundaries and drawing the line. And, at the end of the day, you still have a company to run. You still need results, and you still need, an ROI. So it's like, there's this line of being a friend and being kind and being passionate and also being tough in a good way. Yeah. And, I think that is what every single person struggles with, even if you don't have your own business, even in your own home, it's the same thing. So that's a big learning curve for all of us.
I think every book I read, or every person that sort of graduates to higher positions at work, they always say the hardest thing. Like, I didn't realize that managing people and managing my team was going to take up so much of my time, so much of my energy. And it's because when you're managing people, you're managing their role, but you're also managing their, you're especially, well, I think in any industry, you're just you're lending them empathy and, reading their room and considering so much more than just their role. And I think to manage multiple people, or even if it's just one person, and to lose that sense of control and have to go with whatever they're presenting you on any one day, tough.
Yeah, it is. It's tough. It's, ridiculous. But that is how I manage my husband, though. And that sounds terrible that I say I manage my husband, but I mean, any relationship is a compromise. But I think that that's when you live and you work with someone, and we are each other's entire lives. I mean, we have one bank account. Like, no one can spend something without the other person knowing. Like, it's we're that intertwined. It's you have to be on the same page about almost everything, which is where parenting, I think, for relationships is like that big exploding supernova of your entire relationship, because suddenly it's not about just who you are with each other, it's how you are as parents with these little rugrats, and they put so much pressure on you, and they just make you like, peel away the onion layers, and suddenly you realize who you really are. Because mum rage is a real thing.
Oh yeah.
Mum rage is insane, I will tell you that. But to make sure that you're on the same page with your partner, like things like, how do you discipline your kids? You have to be on the same page about those type of things. Still, like little silly things like, what religion are we going to raise our kids? If that's even a thing for you as a couple, like there's
totally what language you allow to be
said
in front of them, like words, or it's really tough.
And suddenly that's when you realize, like, you could go, I mean, we went almost 11 years together, just the two of us. And then you introduce these kids, and then suddenly you realize that there's very different ways of doing things. And what do you mean? Like, I think that's too harsh. Like, you're being too harsh. And he's like, no, I'm being totally normal. And that's where the real like difficulties come up, like, and that's when the real complications and having to discuss everything, which funny enough is what we had to do when we adopted Enzo, because the home study report is all of those questions, like, up front. And I think if every single parent had to go through the hoops that we had to jump through as adoptive parents, you know, you have this person, you have this social worker who comes into your life, and she's like, how much money do you have? You know, what do you do for jobs? Who's going to be the main caretaker? What religion are you going to do? How are you disciplining your kids? Like, these were
Wow.
questions that I think, you know, when we had a Nico, no one asked us. Like, it was congratulations, how exciting. No one asked us those questions, but when we needed to adopt Enzo, those were the questions that we had to sit down and discuss and figure those out before we even went to the next step. And
That's
I think
amazing to do it all before the fact, because I often think when people separate or divorce, they say you never really know your partner until you go through a divorce, and it's kind of like you never really know your partner until you have babies. But then when they come, it's too late to like do what you're saying, to sort of
have those
preemptively
discussions.
plan.
Exactly.
So maybe we should all have to do
Exactly.
this.
Well, I reckon
Maybe this
that
is what the
that would be
obstetrician
a
should be
pretty good
doing.
thing.
Yes.
Exactly. Instead of going in for your first scan, it's like this little questionnaire of like, have you really thought this through?
God.
But yeah, it's very invasive. Like, there's like two different types of parenting that I've already gone through, because, you know, adoption is very mentally invasive. It's so much pain in terms of the paperwork and the waiting and the anxiety all around that. And then you have the physical pregnancy with the Nico, which is like very invasive physically. You know, I've never been so touched in my life from complete different strangers at every stage of the pregnancy. You know, so that it is two different ways of going through you know, conceiving in that way. It's just like, it's completely polar opposites, but both just as stressful as each other.
So if we go back and talk about like when you and Luke decided that you wanted to expand and have a family, and was it always the plan that you were going to adopt, or if you feel comfortable, was it a fertility thing, or was it something that you just felt really driven to do to go, because you were 32 at the time, or 31 maybe when you started the process, because you popped on your socials that officially on May 20th 2022 you adopted him and you became his formal parent. So what came before that?
So I've actually known I was going to adopt since I was 17 years old. And
it's like an old soul. I love it.
It actually came, so I went to a Catholic high school in Alice Springs, and part of, you know, this experience, there was an opportunity to go to East Timor for 2 weeks to help rebuild fallen schools and work at the orphanage. You know, it's a little bit of you know, work outside of school and getting that experience. And that was just something I wanted to do. My mum just was like, why do you want to do this? You know, this seems, we were told actually from the Australian government not to proceed on this trip, because at that time East Timor was in the middle of a conflict internally. There was still a lot of danger, especially in the city. And we had this meeting before we went, and it was like, are we going to do this? Are we going to send our, you know, teenage kids across to do this mission? And, you know, we were like, we want to go, we want to do this. So yeah, that was a crazy experience, but we did. But that was actually where this whole thing happened. And I think when you're teenagers, you know, you are very selfish, you're very self-centered, and to witness and experience and work with kids in that situation, it is the most eye-opening thing you can experience. And, you know, even like thinking about it, it's like I'm getting really emotional about it.
My the hairs on my arms are standing up. I can feel it.
It's hard because we grow up so privileged. You know, I've never had to worry about where my next meal comes from. You know, I know that I have a home. I know that I have parents. I know that I have family that love me. If I wanted to ask for a PlayStation or Nintendo 64, let's get real.
I'm totally with
you
you.
know, Game Boy. You know, I would just ask my parents and they'd be like, yeah, you know, we can give this to you. And here I was surrounded by kids who slept in tents and would duck down under their whatever they had under their jackets at a thunderstorm because the sound of thunder reminded them of bombs dropping. It was a horrendous experience, like in that sense, to see that, because your heart just breaks and you just suddenly realize, wow, I'm really lucky, you know, I really am. And working with this orphanage, I sat and I spoke to one of the boys who was there, and he was at that stage, I reckon he was around 21 or 22 years old, and he told me, I was actually one of these kids from this orphanage, and now I'm the bus driver. So he would pick them up and he would take them out to like the medical appointments, if there were any, you know, medical appointments, that sort of stuff. And he said, you know, out of all the kids that had aged out of the system, you know, between what he considered his siblings, his family, you know, there were basically 3 left. All the others, I mean, they're not equipped for life. They don't have the life skills. They don't have money or protection for when they age out of the system. They're just put back onto the streets and they just got to work it out themselves. And a lot of them end up in, you know, terrible situations. We're talking about, you know, sex work and whatever they can do to survive. And a lot of them don't survive because they just can't handle it. And I cried. Like I sat there and cried listening to him, and I just thought, this is shit house. Like, there are so many kids, and it's almost like geographical luck of what you get given, and it felt so unfair. And that was the moment. Like, that was the moment when my life, when I went, you know what, if I was to have a family one day, it would be really important for me to consider this. And yeah, when I met Luke in the early parts of my relationship, and most of my relationships that I had prior to him, I would have this conversation going, by the way, if anything was to happen with us, I would like to adopt. You know, is that something that you could do and you would be comfortable with? And the reality is, for a lot of people, it's a hard concept. It's a hard concept to think that you can love a child that's not biologically yours. And like, no judgment, because that's a tough call, you know. It, in our hearts, like in our own bodies, you know, you want to, I don't know if it's a selfish biological need, but you want to have a child that looks like you and that you know, who does he, you know, oh, that quirky trait is so like your father, or you know what I mean? Like you have this instant connection with your own kids, and you don't have that with a child that's not biologically yours. And that's tough for a lot of men or women to consider. But Luke was like, that doesn't bother me. Like, I'm totally fine with that. But yeah, and you know, and then after we got married, so actually, funny enough, I was never the marrying type. I just couldn't care less. I just thought, you know, it's a piece of paper, who gives a shit? But I was living in Singapore. We were living in Singapore at the time, and I had to change my visa, and my visa requirements for Luke to stay with me was that we had to be married for him to be a dependent pass.
Oh my God.
So our marriage originally was to appease the Singapore government because I needed him to stay.
Transactional.
We were very, very, yeah, you know, totally rational people there. And we were just going to go and sign the paperwork and be done with it. And then my lovely Asian mother sat on my couch and cried and said, but you're my only daughter. Like, how are you going to get married and there not be a wedding? And so we ended up having this beautiful wedding, mind you, like in hindsight, it was fantastic. But we ended up having a wedding for my mother, essentially, for the mothers, both mothers, really, even Luke's mum too, which is funny. But, you know, we did this big thing in Santorini and ran away and just thought, we'll have a holiday and get married and best decision ever, really.
Oh, so you got married in Greece?
Yeah, we did. We got married in Santorini in 2018.
Oh, yeah.
We just thought, let's have a holiday and invite all our favorite people. And that's just what we did. And we just had a big holiday for a week. Celebrated doing silly things. Breaking our rental cars in particular. Don't ask. But yeah, that was part of the stage of, okay, we're married now. And funny enough, in order for us to adopt, it is very much a legal requirement for a lot of countries that you have to be married. So that was when we sat down and went, okay, are we going to do this? And it was like, well, if we're going to do it, we're going to have to do it now, because it's going to take a while. Like we had done the research. We knew that the adoption process is not a fast thing. It's very, very slow. That was 2018. We got married. We started the application in 2019. And it took a year for us to get through the home study report, as I mentioned, where lovely social workers pry into every aspect of your life, where you suddenly start doubting yourself as a person and think, oh my God, am I mentally able to do this?
Am I a good parent?
Yeah, exactly. You do. Like, suddenly you think, do I drink too much wine?
Oh, my God. I still think that.
Very much.
I'm fit to do this.
Yeah, the self-doubt is real there. You know, you answering these questions and you're like, oh God, can I be a mum? But yeah, so that took about a year. And once we got approved to be adoptive parents, that was in 2020, just before 2020. We had sent the application to Ghana. And there's a particular reason why we chose Ghana, which was, one, we wanted an English-speaking country. And we wanted somewhere that the economy was stable, because we knew that where our child was going to be from was going to be a big part of our life and their lives. And we wanted somewhere that we can visit. And, you know, that would be a good place to be. But also the ethical part of the adoption, which for those who are in the adoption space would probably know, but adoption itself is a very black market like area, and it's terrible. I mean, even Singapore itself is not even recognized by the UK government for adoptions because of their relationship with Malaysia and Indonesia, where there is a lot of child trafficking, and what we call the baby market, where most adoptive parents want very young babies. And you can essentially buy very young babies at any price. And you can even ask what kind of gender you want, or, you know, how dark their skin color is. It's a very scary area, adoption, and it's fraught with very terrible things. And, you know, going down this route, I was thinking, I wasn't even aware of this until we started this whole process and we started learning about all the bad parts of adoption. And it's very hard to do it in the good way, for a lot of people, because, you know, it's a market. And when there's a market, you know, it's not great. But Ghana had just joined the Hague Convention. Hague, Hague. Ooh, probably should check that one.
What is it?
I think it's the Hague. And, you know, they basically had closed off intercountry adoptions for many years prior to that, and they had just opened to intercountry adoptions in 2020. And basically it was going through this central body. You were going to be matched with a child ethically. You know, gone are the days where couples could fly into Africa, go to an orphanage and go, I want that one.
Choose one, yeah.
And pay some lawyer to give you the paperwork and fly out with a child. And that still happens in many of those countries today. But, you know, that's not what we wanted to do. We wanted to do this the best way that we could. And yeah, that's how we landed on Ghana. And it just, you know, so happened 2020 was not a great year for anyone, I don't think.
No, the year the world paused and started to wear the masks.
It was unbelievable, because we had just had this like thrill of, oh
Mm.
my God, this is happening. We have sent our application to Ghana. And then, March 2020, the whole world stood still and, nothing was happening there. Nothing was happening in Singapore. We were staying in our apartment. I had turned 30 that year and I was in lockdown and we
Same.
wanted to go to, yeah, there you go.
Yes,
How exciting was our
I had my
birthday?
30th, a very COVID-y kind of, it was a very COVID-y
Yeah,
day.
it was.
Yes.
I pretty much watched Netflix and like had some friends send me like tons of like Deliveroo
Yeah.
and food and like I was like
Oh, the
blowing
good
out my own
times.
candles. I was like, not what I thought for my 30th, but cool. Like, we'll just go
Yeah.
with it. And it felt like everything had stopped. It felt like the whole world had stopped, and then suddenly Luke and I missed our family. Like, it was when you don't have access to the
Yeah.
people you love anymore,
Mm.
you realize how important it is to be near them.
Yeah.
It being in Singapore, it's such a central hub. Like we could get to Europe and we could get to America and Australia anytime we want because we're just so central. Like that's the place that you go to be in between everyone and everything. And
Yeah.
suddenly we were closed off and we were stuck with just each other. I mean, of course, my good friends are there, which is fantastic, but they don't replace your family.
Mm.
And Luke's grandfather died that
Mm.
year, unfortunately, and we were just in lockdown and he couldn't do anything and he just felt so helpless. And we just went, fuck, did we make a huge mistake? Like, we are stuck here and now all we want to do is go home to Australia, but we can't go home to Australia because our entire adoption is based through Singapore because, that's who's approved us and it's this whole process of legalities.
Oh, wow. So you really were anchored in all senses
We
to
were anchored.
Singapore.
Yeah,
Wow.
and to leave Singapore and return to Australia meant that we would give up this idea of adopting.
Mm.
And it was very, very slow. Like we stayed until 2021. I think that a whole year passed and we kept getting updates. No, Ghana's not opening. It's just paused. And we had this conversation. We thought, okay, you know what? Let's do it. We'll get to December 2021. If we haven't heard anything, we'll return home. We're going to go back to Australia. We just want to be close to family. And funny enough, at that same time, we thought, okay, I'm 30 now. Maybe we should start trying as well on the side, see what happens. Because, all my it's what's really funny? All the people who really don't try to have kids just like get it instantly. And then, all
Yeah.
the people who are trying to have kids, it just doesn't happen instantly.
Yeah.
And for all of my friends around me, we were in that second batch, people who were really trying and it just wasn't happening. And we had this conversation going, well, we should probably start now because
Mm.
it's not as
Take a
easy as
while. Yeah.
it's not going to be as easy as we think. And so, we started trying in like June 2021 and I was pregnant by the next month. And I just thought, oh, fuck. Like, we've really messed this up now because I wanted to go home to Australia and have this child. And, and that would now officially mean that we are giving up this adoption. And we've just been through so much to make this happen. How are we going to do this?
That's so hard because it's like the happiest moment, but not tarnished, but wrapped in like a lot of hard decision making.
Yeah. And it was stressful. But that really cliche, like everything happens for a reason.
Totally.
I can't even express how much that, that really played into this. So we went for our first baby scan. I think it was July. And unfortunately, I found out that it was a blighted ovum, which is essentially like the sac is growing, but the embryo was not there.
Mm.
And, the doctor was like, first time, no big deal. You just don't give up hope. Like it's totally normal. We'll have to evacuate your womb, which, I still laugh about that because that just sounds so intense. But that was on my health insurance, evacuation of womb.
Oh my God, the terminology in medicine needs to be updated. So,
Doesn't
like, I
it?
came
Because
across like an incompetent uterus the other day. I was like, can that make women feel a little bit more like human?
it's true. Because I read that on my health insurance, and I'm thinking, dear Lord, like that sac had to get evacuated out of my womb. Like, how unhomely am I?
Yeah, God, it's
um,
not
but I
kind.
mean, at that stage, like, I hadn't had any fertility checks or anything. I didn't think I had any issues. We didn't know we had any issue. We don't have any issues, thankfully. But that was my first pregnancy, and as I was being wheeled into that day surgery, I got an email on my phone.
Oh my God, the hairs have stood up my arms again.
Yeah. So I had
Oh my
literally
God.
carried this empty sack. I had the morning sickness. I had all the horrible things that go with early pregnancy, but I didn't have the baby there. And I am in the bed waiting to be wheeled into surgery. And I received the email, and we had been matched with a child. And like, insane, like insane. And I just wanted to tell Luke, like, I'm just like, oh my God. But here I am about to be knocked out. So yeah, I like, wake up and I'm just like so eager to get out of this hospital. And yeah, and that was it. We've been matched with a 4.5-year-old boy. His name at that time was Jaden. He was this gorgeous boy, but we just were like, we didn't realize we were going to be matched with a 4.5-year-old because, in this adoption process, everyone prepares you to be matched with a younger child. They kind of they talk to you like you're going to be matched with a 1 to 2-year-old at most. And like, we're not obviously, against an older child, but we weren't mentally prepared for that. And then there was those new questions. If we take this match, we have to start thinking about school much sooner.
4.5, they're little people. They're
They are little
borderline
people.
children.
They are
Yeah,
little
God,
people.
there's a lot. I've got a 4-year-old now, 4.5-year-old now, and I'm thinking if he came into my life now,
Yep.
it's a very different conversation than a newborn because,
Yep. Exactly.
There's a lot needed.
We had to have that conversation, not because we were going to deny it, but because when we had planned this thing, we thought we still had maybe a couple of years. Okay, maybe we could still do another year in Singapore so we can move slowly, we can, not this quick transition. But, 4.5, like we really needed to start working out, right, what are we doing for school? Who's going to be, how are we going to do that? Like, this is a person who has big feelings and can talk. Like, how do we do this? And it just came back to that whole, if we don't accept this match, he's 4.5 years old already, and it's very unlikely that any other person is going to take a child of this age, because the sad fact is, most kids by 3, the chances of getting adopted out just get lower and lower and lower every year, because a lot of people aren't willing to take older kids. And we just looked at his face and we just went, we can't say no. We can't say no to this boy. We've got to give it a go. And that was it. We packed up. I mean, I was like, still not even over the fact that I'd lost so cold my first pregnancy. And we were about to jump on a plane and get to Ghana and pack up our entire lives for what we thought was 3 months, to move to Ghana and be with this little boy and get to know him. And yeah, it became the hardest 2 years of our lives. I will not lie. The adoption process and being there and being, maybe also with COVID on top of it, it's the hardest season of my life I've ever had.
So you were in Ghana for 2 years?
We were in Ghana for 1 year.
Yeah.
But we were, in a way, we felt mentally stuck as well. We had our business. I had my job at that stage. I was working at a very big publishing house in the content marketing department, as a lead of video. And as I just said, I'd literally just gone from firing my entire team to losing my pregnancy and now getting on a plane to adopt a 4.5-year-old boy that I'd never met in a country I'd never been to. And COVID was there on top of it. So even for us to get to Ghana at that time was a nightmare. It was like we had to write special permissions to enter the country because the country still wasn't open up to tourism at that stage. The visa process to get in and out of the country was so difficult. But, we powered through. More paperwork. If anyone who's ever been through adoption knows, it's endless paperwork. But yeah, we arrived and, 4 months later, there was a so-called African variant and the entire world blocked out Africa. So
a COVID variant.
The COVID variant, the so-called African COVID variant. And then suddenly half the world decided that they weren't going to accept any flights coming out of Africa. So what we thought what we could do at that time was, Luke could still fly back to Singapore and take some jobs. And that didn't happen. So we lost our business entirely because both of us were in Ghana and we could not fly back to do our commercials or any jobs at all. And suddenly we were very unemployed, living off all the savings that we had. And it was just so stressful. We couldn't even get back to Singapore anyways if we wanted to because there was this whole 2-week in a hotel. So even by the time we would get there to do our job, you'd have to be 2 weeks ahead of it. And then, of course, we couldn't even fly out to Singapore because it was banned.
Where were you living in Ghana? And did you have Enzo with you at this point for that year?
Yeah. So we arrived in Ghana, and first we had to do 2 weeks of visits at the orphanage, and that was essentially to get him to warm up to us. So it wasn't like, we just rock up and take a child.
What was that like? Like, what did they say? Did they say, here, here's mum and dad?
The strangest experience because
again, I'm thinking of my 4.5-year-old and they're very aware of.
Yeah.
If I said to my 4.5-year-old, no, he entered a room and I said, this is A and B, he's going to have a lot of questions and a lot of, but what about everything else? Like, that's a huge undertaking for both you and him.
Yeah. And we couldn't even communicate because he spoke Twi, the dialect.
Oh my God.
One of the main dialects there. We couldn't communicate with him. He was a very different child to what he is now. He was almost like catatonic. Like he didn't smile, he didn't laugh, he didn't engage or respond. And for many parts of the first rounds of visiting, I started, researching like autism and all these type of things because I thought maybe there's, maybe
developmental thing going on.
Yeah, maybe there's something here. How could we help this if this is what's happening? And it was in a way for me, even for myself, to just feel better about the situation, like going into research and understanding trauma in kids. And there's so many books that I've read because of this. And again, that also plays into my later on in my communication skills. But yeah, it was really difficult to be with this child who wanted nothing to do with you, couldn't communicate with you. And essentially the very first day that we took him home, it's legal kidnapping, to describe it in its best way. He doesn't understand, like obviously the orphanage is not meant for him to be there for his life, but to that little boy, that's his home. And those kids there are his family. And that caretaker there is the closest thing to a mother he's ever had. And yeah, I mean, he doesn't eat well. He was malnourished and, he had patches of hair missing and he looked really unwell in that sense. But to him, that was his life and that's all he knew. And here were two random strangers picking him up and going, hey, we're your parents now. Like, trust us as
Mm.
we
It's
snatch
gonna
you
be
away
great.
from your entire life. Yeah, believe me, it'll be wonderful.
It's gonna be great.
And yeah, he cried. He cried the entire, we had a 2-hour car ride home, and he cried so hard, and it's the most helpless you can ever feel, because you just want to tell him it's okay. I promise you it's okay, but you can't. And physical touch is not something that a 4.5-year-old wants right now, because he doesn't know you. And here you are trying to offer a hug or hold his hands, and he's like, get off me, weirdo. It's so hard, and it just got harder. All of that whole trauma. I mean, the thing with adoption, and I say this to my husband, and this is actually something we're working on as a personal project, but the thing with adoption is most people hear this really fairy tale narrative to adoption, and everyone sees that you adopt this boy, look at him now. It's this magical experience. But for the first 3 to 6 months of our life with Enzo, it is the most difficult thing we've ever experienced in our life. We were essentially being in a abusive relationship with a 4-year-old, because he couldn't use words to express himself. So biting, kicking, punching, spitting, defecating, running away, that was what we had for 6 months. And everyone tells you have to love this boy, but you are trying to love a child who is actively pushing you
Rejecting
away
you.
and telling you, I want nothing to do with you, I hate you. Like, it's so hard, and you think that there is no way out, and you sit there and you look at your husband and you go, oh my God, we've made a huge mistake. Like, what did we do? And then all those selfish parts of your life start coming in. You go, I've given up my career for this. I've given up my comfort to be here. I have dropped everything. And you start getting this internal rage of like, why won't you appreciate this? And it's like, it's really scary saying this stuff out loud, because there's this judgment of it, but this is the truth. I mean, I'll tell you now, like, Luke and I, we love Enzo as our own flesh and blood. Like that, like, I look at Anika and I look at Enzo and I don't see any different now. Now, we're 2 years into this adoption, but for the first 6 months to 8 months, it was the worst thing we could have gone through. And I had bruises on my face, we had scratches, bites, we just didn't know what to do. And we just kept thinking, well, we can't give up on him, we can't have done all of this for nothing. And it is the hardest experience of our life. And it's a boy with trauma, and he can't communicate, and he can't tell us how he feels, and the only thing he can do is he just has this rage inside of him, and it's just, he needs to let it all out, and we just had to be the safe space for him to do that. And it was tough. It was really, really tough. Like, hard.
It's so hard when you find yourself resenting your own child.
Yeah.
Because it happens, and you know that you'll get over it, but in the minute you do think like, I've given up this, I've given up that, I could be doing this, I could be doing that, but I've given it all up for you, and for you to treat me like this.
Yeah.
But then, of course, then the guilt,
Yep.
you're like, how dare I think like that, especially for you, like, that I think that is so complex.
And I didn't have a Nico at that stage to compare that to. So here I was feeling like I'm a shit person. I wanted this so bad. And now I have you. And all I can feel is this
Rage.
bubble of depression that we are living in, because I'm looking at my husband and he is a shell of a person that he was, because, we're talking about tantrums that, I would say tantrums, but I'm going to call them tantrums, that would last for 8 hours. We had to tap each other in and out, because we had to sit there in the pain, in the screaming, in the yelling, in every bad part of being a parent. We got all of that in the first 6 months. And, I see, Annie's now almost 16 months and she's in that toddler phase, and like the mum rage happens still here. But, now I can see it. You know what? It's the same. It's just because you want the best for your kids. It's because you want to protect them, you want to love them, and you want them to have everything you want to give them. And then it's like when they aren't, open to that and they're not giving that back to you, you get angry.
You want them to know
yeah.
you're doing what you're doing, even if it's setting a rule, setting a boundary. You're doing it
Yep.
to help them, because you love them.
And they
But
don't understand.
they don't understand that.
I
Yeah,
know,
and
that's
the
the
hard part.
hardest. Yeah. And that's what we struggled with, and we couldn't even explain to him in English, like it's like my husband has this really great way of explaining this. It was like adopting an alien who had lived his entire life in four walls. He hadn't experienced being in a kitchen or going outside in the real world. And we looked at those moments that we had with him, those new experiences, and that's what kept us going. There's this, I'll never forget, the first time we went to a shopping center, and there's the elevators, and we opened up the elevator door. We went in and we pressed the button and the elevator doors closed. And this is obviously the first time he'd ever experienced an elevator at 4.5 years of age.
Oh my gosh.
And, we're going up. He's not phased, doesn't understand. Anyways, those doors open and we're at obviously a completely different store, a different area. And he just looked at me and went, "What? Like, where are we? Like, how did that happen?" It was like magic to him because, he just never experienced that. And, you just think, fuck, like, these are things that we just take for granted. And this was a boy who had pretty much minimal experiences in anything other than maybe a couple of medical appointments. And the world was dangerous in his eyes. He didn't know how anything worked. I mean, we were in an Airbnb. We were staying in an Airbnb, and we had this little kitchen that was open to our living room, and Luke was making coffee, and in our mind we're thinking he'll know the dangers of a kitchen. Like, he's 4.5 years of age, like, surely. And we turn around and he's about to put his hand on the boiler, like the stove, and we're rushing over and we whip him away from it to save him, from burning his hands. And of course he doesn't understand what's happening. He's just thinking, why won't you let me do this? And he goes into a fit of rage because he's like, I don't get it. Like, what are you doing? Why are you grabbing me and moving me away? And we can't communicate with him about his safety and stuff. And it was a very, very tough time. There was a moment where we sat on the floor, we looked at each other and we went, can we do this? Can we continue doing this?
When did he start to trust you? When did the bond begin?
I would say after the first 3 months. Those first 3 months was, very, very tough. Then language sort of started to develop. We started doing like things like getting a warm cup of water and a cold cup of water and going hot, cold, and hello, goodbye, all of those like things, language development skills that we did. And I reckon kids are such sponges. Oh my God, I wish I could learn a language as fast as bloody kids do. By the end of 3 months, he was already like conversational.
Wow.
And, he was beginning to say things like, thank you, and can you tuck me in? Like, can we go to bed? And it was those real moments when you were like, okay, I can see that there is this beautiful boy under there and he was just scared and afraid, and that's not the real him. This is the real him. And it was honestly what stopped me from leaving was the moment when he actually reached up and he touched my face and he just said, I love you, mama. And it was like, I was like, fuck, okay, we're doing something right. Something right is happening. And we just went, we can't leave him. We can't undo what we've done. And it's just
our boy.
Yeah. And it's those moments where love and respect and trust and all of that is built.
Yeah.
And that's really how love and a relationship is, because,
Oh, yeah.
I get a lot like, how do you love a child that's not biologically yours? And you, it's difficult. I'm not going to lie, it's difficult, but you can, and we do. Right, like, as I say, Enzo is our son. I look at him and he is my son. Like, he is so much like my mother. It's not even funny. I've adopted my
That
own
is
mother.
so funny. Written in the stars. So when
Yeah.
did you fall pregnant with Aniko, and how was that? I'm so curious, like Enzo watching you become pregnant.
Yeah.
How was that? And then seeing a baby being born from
Yeah.
that young age, what was his understanding like, his emotion?
Well, we have a little joke that both our kids are African because Annie was actually conceived in Africa.
Oh my
She was
gosh,
conceived
so
in
funny.
Ghana. But that was, again, one of those things when you're not even trying. It it was, we were so stressed. That was towards the very tail end. I had to go back to Singapore by myself. I had to leave the boys there because my job at that stage went, look, we've given you 6 months sabbatical and now you need to come back or you'll lose your job. And that was hard because, well, actually, thankfully, in a way, the African variant was around because I couldn't get back. I literally, Singapore would not accept flights from Africa. My only option would be to go to Germany for 2 weeks and then fly to Singapore. And my company was like, look, we don't want you to go through that. So what we'll do is we'll let you work for 3 months remotely. And then after that, we'll see what the situation is and hopefully you can get back. Otherwise, we're going to have to let you go pretty much. And that was really scary because we were already losing our business. We'd lost our business essentially. And yeah, that was really terrifying. And we were stressed. As I said, that was the worst 2 years of my life in terms of the mental space we were at. And my period had pretty much been very sporadic at that stage. It was just crazy just from the stress. And it's amazing how your body reacts to your mental well-being. But yeah, so that was, I reckon that was around June 2022. So that was a month after we were finally granted adoption of Enzo. We were his parents. And now we were waiting for passports and all of that. And I couldn't stick around any longer. And yeah, and I flew back to Singapore. And again, wasn't weird that my period was missing because it had been very erratic for the past year. I was feeling really sick. Just again, I'm really stressed. I'm trying to get my boys home to Singapore. I just want, life to go back to normal. And yeah, I just thought, okay, it's kind of weird. It's been 2 weeks now. Maybe I should just check. Took a, little test and found out I was positive and, I was having a baby. And I just thought, oh my God, I'm not ready. Like, I'm mentally not ready. I wanted more time with Enzo. We wanted more time with Enzo just so he knew, because at that stage we'd been together as a family for a year. And as I said, the first 6 months was already very, very tough. And we wanted more bonding time. And I just thought, this is terrible in a way. Like, this is really not the right time. And knowing that I was pregnant, again, it's that whole thing of fast forwarding. We're going to have to get back to Australia because I want to be with my family now, more than ever. I want to be with our families and have that support. And it was really shitty because I felt so happy, but so shitty at the same time. Because again, it just put a spanner in the works of what we thought we had a plan and how we were going to get back. And on top of that, we were getting Enzo his visas to come to Singapore as a resident. Now, on top of that, we needed to get Enzo citizenship and visas to come to Australia. And we did not realize how hard that was going to be. We thought, we were very naive. We thought, we're 2 Australian citizens. Why would they delay us, and why would this
Have
be
any
difficult to
questions? Yeah,
process?
yeah.
Exactly, for our son. But the subclass 102 visa for your adopted child is a very, very hard process to get your child into Australia. And here I was on a time limit of 9 months. And yeah, but I mean, Enzo was, when finally the boys came to Singapore and I revealed it to the boys, and Enzo was like, "What's going on? I don't understand. Like, am I getting a sibling?" And he was just really happy because we just said, there's going to be another baby to play with. And he loves babies. Like, he's just so good with kids in general. If you meet my son, like, he radiates this energy of just, I mean, the other day, as I said, I had this I did a test of this podcast, and I had my son on there testing the sound and
I
stuff,
love
and I
watching his
posted it.
podcast.
I shit you not, he was the most happening piece of content on my Instagram ever. I got more messages. Yeah,
I could have picked up podcasting tips just looking at him. So he had that cool
I picked up
swagger.
podcasting tips from him.
Born to be there.
But yeah, he just has this just energy that, I mean, all kids love. He's like the most popular kid at school. Honestly, every kid knows his name. But yeah, and he was just thrilled. And I just remember one of the first questions was like, "Is she's going to be black like me?" Just like, okay, we're going to have a little chat about, how skin color works, and, you got your beautiful skin from your birth mama. She's not going to have the same color skin as you. She's probably going to look more like Papa or me. Like, we're not really sure yet. But he was just really thrilled. Like, he didn't understand, but he was really thrilled. And I think, again, from being surrounded by kids at the orphanage, it was probably a shock to his system more to be an only child than to not. But yeah, he loved that process, and he saw my belly getting bigger, and he would just call me fat as a joke. Mama's getting so fat now.
Oh, bless.
Yeah, and then the first time he felt her kick was like, oh my God, his face was just like, she's in your belly? Like,
oh my God.
How is she going to get out? And I'm like, oh, that's a whole other question. That's a whole other conversation we're going to have, kid.
The elevator experience,
seriously
jacked up to feel the human in your belly. And what was that like when she was born and he saw her?
Well, he almost wasn't here for that experience. So I had to, I went against my doctor's wishes, and I was supposed to get on a flight to Australia well before my 35 weeks of pregnancy, because, there's a whole rule about this. And me being the forever rule breaker just went, fuck that.
It'll be fine.
Yeah, it'll be fine. She won't come out early. What are you talking about? So I got on the plane, I think at 36 and a half weeks. I was really cutting it close. Had to get a letter from my doctor for me to get on that plane.
Yeah.
Because the airline was like, nope.
No, thank you.
I arrived in Melbourne, I think it was the end of January, and I had to beg my way into the hospital here, public system, because obviously I was way too late for any type of private care at that stage. And I was so behind. I had to basically do everything that I would have done in my first 9 months of pregnancy, in 2 weeks at the hospital. I had to get my blood's done. I had to get new ultrasounds, everything, because they were just like, well, we need to find out what's happening and where you're at with this baby. And then, of course, it turns out that I had been leaking amniotic fluid this entire time, and was told that I was most likely going to have an induction. And, they'd given me a rough date, I think we've got about a week before you're going to give birth. And at that stage, my boys were still stuck in Singapore, and we were just waiting for visas. And little business hat me, we started approaching every politician we could. I went into, tiger mum mode and just went, no, my husband and my son are gonna be here. Like, on top of this, they actually denied our tourist visa as well, because he was deemed as a risk of
Oh my God.
staying in Australia, because a tourist visa is supposed to have a return ticket, which of course I didn't have a return ticket for them. And they denied it. They were like, nope, your son's a risk. I'm like, my son is 5 years old. Like, what is he going to do? You go into this like, it doesn't
Totally.
make sense. But I mean, you can't get angry at them. They're just doing their job, and I get it. But yeah, and it was just, we reached the right person, and he said, look, I will help you. I will contact who I know, and I'll see what can happen. And yeah, like the very next day we got an email and Enzo was approved, and that just goes to show, like, it's who you know.
Yeah.
And that sucks, like, it really, because the system is I mean, I know people who still have partner visas and it's taken them 4 years, and it's bullshit. Like,
It's so crazy, that system, because it's who you know, and it's also like the person's mood on the day. Like that
it is.
person, man or woman, if he had have had a shocker and he just received yours and just sort of felt, I just can't deal with this today, there goes your opportunity. So it's such a luck thing at the end of the day.
It is. Yeah, it is. And I mean, I don't envy the immigration system at all. I mean, I'm sure they've got the hardest job on the planet. Can you imagine being abused every day of your life from emails going, like, you, like, just let me, like, this is my partner, this is my son, this is my, it's family, and people get very personal and very emotional about it. Like, we know. But it was really terrifying thinking that I was going to go through this experience and not have my husband and my son with me. And that was really scary.
Especially after everything you'd been through, that just to have that birth with your family, not that any of that is easy, but to have that like more traditional sense of just that one
I
thing
just
you
wanted
wanted
to
it
be
to
with
be
them.
yours. Yeah.
I just wanted to be with them. And after, having to leave them behind in Ghana, and then, again, it always felt like I had to leave. I always had to leave. And then I had this like aching sense of like Luke's getting this bonding time. And it was still hard at that stage. Like Enzo was still in this very emotional stage where he could still flip. And it turns out, it's a lot to contribute to ADHD as well. Emotional imbalance. Which he just recently got diagnosed with, which I'm not surprised because he's a ball of energy. But yeah, and I wanted to be there because I just thought, God, Luke is doing this all on his own. And I know that's really silly because it's like, even me, I'm doing all of this on my own too. And it's just like,
carrying a baby, yeah.
And you're in, as you know, a very unstable emotional state.
Yeah.
And like, to me, it just felt like the world was burning. I just wanted everything to be perfect, and I wanted everything to be calm. And we just had such rough past years, like since 2020, like the last 3 years has just been hell. I just felt so unstable. I haven't felt secure in everything, like in anything. I'd lost my business. I'd lost my job at this stage now because I'm moving to Australia. It just felt like it hadn't stopped.
Yeah.
And it's not a great emotional state to be in when you're about to give birth. But, thankfully, I don't know, some kind of luck, I actually had a really wonderful birth experience with Annie.
Amazing.
But it, like, everything up until then was awful and horrendous. And it just felt like it never ended, and not probably great when you're starting a relationship with your, adopted son, and you just want to give him stability, and you want to give him a sense of calm and like a sense of, what you're doing. And here we are moving from Ghana to Singapore, then Singapore to Australia. And he'd already been in two schools by then because we had put him in school in Ghana. Then we moved him and we put him into school in Singapore. And again, his gift for language, he was learning Mandarin so quickly.
Oh my
like
gosh.
he was coming home singing songs in like Mandarin. And I'm like, God, I can't even speak English correctly, let alone be bilingual. And then we came back to Australia, and, we're with my husband's side of the family, and they speak Italian. So Annie's bilingual. And, Enzo's now trying to learn Italian. And it's just like, I got to give credit to this boy who has done so much in such a small time, and not because of anything of his own doing. It's just he's had to follow us, and we've just tried to do this for him and to make it better for him, but it doesn't make sense to him that way. It's like you've pulled
Such a
me out
little
of my
generous
life.
spirit of just going with the flow, which is
Yep.
never easy when you're not
Yep.
in control, regardless
Yep.
of what your age is. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that stress that we had was reflecting onto him, and it's just that feeling of insecurity, and like a lot of the hardships that we had with his behavior and outbursts. I mean, honestly, it probably came from the fact that he just didn't feel settled. Like this year, it's the first time that I've actually even been back on my Instagram, and I'm like this is the first year that we've felt
A sense of
settled.
stability. Yeah. Yeah.
Like after 3 years of just chaos, it feels like absolute chaos. And we feel like we're starting from the ground up. Like I've moved from my life in Singapore, where I was established. I was somebody, I was in TV and I had jobs, and I knew every single editor of every single magazine, and all my friends are influencers and important people. And then I come to Australia and I feel like I'm nobody, and it's just, again, that insecurity. But I'm starting from the ground up. I don't have my connections here anymore. I mean, 15 years ago, yeah, but 15 years ago is a long time. Like it's and I'm like, I'm a mum and I'm trying to do work, and I can't because my child is pulling every ounce of my energy, and I just want to like send an email out and introduce myself and like, hey, maybe meet a couple of agents, or like, nope, that's not happening because, hey, she's vomited all over my brand new white couch, thanks. And we were going through a renovation as well, which, God, I'd make the dumbest decisions.
Everyone renovates when they've got a newborn or they're pregnant.
Why
I don't know. I
do we do
moved
that?
house when I was 35 weeks. I look back and I was like, why did I choose then? Like,
It's
why?
the fucking nesting thing, I
It
tell you.
totally is. It's
It's like
such a
suddenly
thing.
we have kids and we want this house, we want this home, and it's like this nesting
Yeah.
thing, and it's like, why? Why do you do that at the same time? It's just
I don't know.
dumb.
It's something innate in us. But I'm so thankful for you sharing your story. And I hope that when we put this podcast out, it reintroduces you as you, because yes, you have updated Instagram, but your story is far more than pictures and captions. Like, I don't think I've heard a story quite like your own in, I don't know, ever. You're a very generous, strong, resilient person. And I think you've just got such an amazing trajectory in front of you. And I have to ask the famous first word, but I was going to ask you one thing, but now I'm so curious. When you think, if I said the word to you, easy, because your life has been, I mean, you've had like beautiful moments, but I guess the starting foundations of your own family have been layered in complexity. So if I said, what do you think of when you hear the word easy?
Ah, you know what? When you're with people you love, it's easy.
I love
Really.
that. Yeah.
You can get through anything for them, and that's what makes it easy. Because you don't do it for you do it for them, and you do it for what you want out of your life with them. So when I think of easy, I think of the people I love, really.
Well, you're such a divine mom. You've got such beautiful little, is Aniko, she's not yet 2, is she? Or is she 2?
No, she's 16 months. She's 16 months of terror.
And then Enzo is 7.
He just turned 7, yeah.
So you've got such a full plate. And wow, I just take my hat off to you. And I just love your energy and your smile. I don't think you've stopped smiling this whole time. You are pure joy.
It's as I said, anytime anyone wants to talk to me, I'm like, yes,
let's
chat
do
to
it.
me, please.
Well, I'm so grateful for your time. I know that you've got a sick bub at home as well, so you're drowning in snot like I am in my household. So it's been lovely to catch up. And yeah, I'm really excited for people to hear your story, because I adore speaking to women, and I've spoken to so many different women who find career and parenthood in all different ways. But I think your story is layered, to say the least. But I guess what has been so constant is, I guess, the love and bond you have with Luke, and just that forever want to just make everyone around you feel loved and stable and nurtured.
Thank you.
You're an
I feel
amazing
so loved
individual.
just from you. It's nice to get words of affirmation for sure, especially after having little kids.
Oh my God, I know. Sometimes you're like, if I said that to you, you would be in a ball of tears, but I just have to take it.
Oh God,
Oh
I'm sorry
gosh.
that this went way
No,
longer
don't
than
be.
expected.
Honestly, I could listen to your story for so long, but thank you for your time and your generosity. And we'll include all the links to all your wonderful work so people can find out your creative side as well.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks for
so
chatting.
much.
Thanks.